Welcome, everyone, to the finale vignettes of San Antonio by Night Aftermath. Tonight, we're going to be following the little threads that need to be kind of settled and tied into place for Bryan and for Faust tonight. So, in that regard, Bryan, it's been a couple weeks since the removal of Jude and Angel from the city. San Antonio has continued to crack down on any interlopers in the city, be they Shalamites, be they Camarilla, be they anyone who would pose a substantial threat to the security of the anarchs of the city. The city still has its own squabbles between its barons, but for now, things are at a relatively peaceful state. And so, you have made your way quietly to the city of Dallas, where Katya has been set herself up, and you know this city to be Camarilla. And so you stay on the outskirts, the fringes, so that you don't get yourself seen by anyone that you don't want to see you. And you've connected with Katya to have a conversation. Perhaps further answer some questions. Maybe keep her updated as to what's going on in San Antonio. But that's for you to decide. As you're on the outskirts of the city, near one of the railways, it's fairly well covered, it's fairly dark.
And will be dressed differently, not entirely. Uh, his usual overshirt will be replaced with a hoodie to cover his head, to keep him in the shadows. You just can't go without those damn alligator skin boots.
And perhaps that's one reason, that's one way that you have told Katya that she would recognize you out here. In that you do see that she is walking out of the dark and toward you, dressed in
Evening.
dressed in black, her hair kind of draping over her shoulders, but still that lovely red lipstick. Hi.
Evening, sis.
Good evening. How you been?
Surviving.
Sure.
You?
Similar. I suppose we should get to the point before somebody starts to see us.
Uh, First off, I wanted to apologize for the abruptness of my last communication. San Antonio is a powder keg when
Powder
it
keg.
comes to, yeah, especially when it comes to well, what our clan is or was, well, your clan, since I don't have one. and anybody that is associated with the Camarilla. Uh,
Yeah.
it wouldn't be advisable to come back anytime soon. Uh,
Yeah, based on the urgency of your last call, it definitely seems that way. Appreciate you looking out for
well,
me.
I told you I would. It's you're important to me. You're the last family member I have that might have any answers for me.
You still have more questions?
Always more questions. But most of those died with our sire. The only questions I truly have that are important are about you and well, your protection, your safety.
Yeah. I'm sure you know that things are continuing to escalate when it comes to removing anarchs, thin
Yeah,
bloods, caitiff.
yeah. That's why we can't be seen too often.
No.
You in my city or me in yours.
Do you think at some point that would change?
Unless we found somewhere that nobody knows, unlikely for the cities and for the groups that have established themselves in the cities that we call our homes. It's unlikely, given the nature of our own life. Those bad feelings have a habit of sticking around for a very long time.
Yeah. Well,
But that doesn't mean that I don't want you to, well, be around or be informed. It just can't be open. It bothers me.
secrets in the shadows. Like every other kindred, I suppose.
It just don't sit well with me. So much of what we are and what we do is already in the shadows. I know there's somebody that I could share any of it with. It's not the kind of person I am.
Well, it's a good thing it's part of what I'm good at, playing with shadows. And she kind of. It's almost as if a bit of the darkness in and around her hand just kind of grows darker for a moment, as if it's like swirling darkness in her hand a little bit, but then it subsides. Reminds you very
Yeah,
much of the kinds of things that Angel does.
I'm familiar with what you can do.
You've met other La Sombra then?
Killed the last one.
I shouldn't be worried, should I?
You aren't. You have nothing to worry about from me. No. Uh, she was a threat.
Like John
I'm
was.
sorry. Uh, I don't know the threat that John was. I don't. Again, I don't know the circumstances of what happened to him.
I don't know all of the details. I heard it secondhand. But a refugee from Jackson, Mississippi, got a bug in his brain that he wanted to take a city. And John went with him. And John died for it. And they weren't successful, and we haven't heard from those from Jackson since.
Do you have some names? Well, I'm not looking for.
You would go looking for them? Even though they're Camarilla?
There's not much I wouldn't do for you. I told you. I don't care about the clans. I don't care about Hanar, Sabat, and Maria. I don't care. That don't matter. Family is family. That's all that matters to me.
Even though our sects are enemies.
As I said, that don't make nothing to me. Your safety was important. If not, I'd have left you in San Antonio, let you go down with the rest of the La Sombra that were being taken out. The rest of the Camarilla that were being taken out. Wouldn't have given you any kind of warning.
You're sweet.
I am what I am. How you take it is entirely on you.
The only word that came back from there about the fate of those who went Jacques came back, but he didn't know anything. At least he says he doesn't. Suppose he's trying to protect his child, Urian Doyle.
The War Baron.
The War Baron, apparently. Infamous for the destruction of Jackson.
I'm not surprised his name's associated with that.
That city serves as a bit of a cautionary tale.
For whom? The Camarilla? Anarchs?
Well, anarchs overthrew the city. What do you
And
think?
here's the cautionary tale for Camarilla.
I would think so. That's That's why Prince Warsi doesn't want any anarchs in this city anymore.
Yeah.
I could be pet to death just for talking to you.
And if they catch you in San Antonio, not only would you be put to death, but I probably would be too. Not far behind, if not before.
Well,
Baron
Darla,
Jameson don't take too kindly to any of the La Sombra,
then it's our
let
little
alone
secret.
Camarilla.
But if there's something that you want to know specifically, I don't know much about the exact details of what happened in Jackson. But I can tell you more about John if you wanted.
Indeed. And if you happen to have some names, I could do some digging, looking around for you. Maybe get word back to you whether or not they're still around or if they've met their final death.
No news is usually bad news.
No
And
news is no news.
I doubt that the anarchs of San Antonio would have let Kyle Calhoun live.
Esty, would I have heard that name?
It's been tossed around a little bit as far as who came to San Antonio and who got their, as she put it, a bug in their brain about taking the city.
Yeah.
And based on the
Okay.
information you know, it's not uncommon knowledge that Kyle A. Calhoun came from Dallas to lay siege.
Well, all I would have would be rumor and speculation.
Same. So, there's no real way
Yeah.
of knowing. Not unless they turn up one day.
Uh-oh. But I would definitely be more interested in learning about John Bell.
What do you want to know?
Everything.
Well, I don't know everything.
I didn't assume you did. Whatever information you have.
He's from Chicago. John Bell might not even be his real name. That's the name I knew him by.
I assumed as much. Figured it was a mask.
Very skilled. Always quick and to the point about getting a job done. He didn't dilly-dally. He just set his mind to a goal and accomplished it.
And to be a spy or an infiltrator, you have to be skilled. I don't know how it slipped up, but I know how it ended for him.
Yeah. On display for the world to see for his execution.
Yeah.
An example. Just angers me to no end thinking that they would do that. Anarchs are savage, Bryan.
Gotcha. We're all savages. We're all monsters deep inside.
But they're worse.
How?
No rules. Free to put an end to your enemies willy-nilly without thinking of the consequences.
There's always consequences. And it's not all just willy-nilly. There's
But no law and order. It's chaos.
not completely. All progress is change, but not all change is progress. We don't play by the same rules. You have laws and what's the term that y'all use?
Traditions.
Yeah, we still have traditions, but outside of the masquerade, most of
Everything's
y'all's
fair game.
traditions, most of y'all's traditions just don't hold up. Maybe we will kill ourselves and run ourselves out, but
I really would hate to see that happen to you.
and I would hate to see that happen to you, but I kneel before no man. I don't care how old he is.
Then I suppose that's where we differ. It's...
You have your reasons.
It forces civility amongst monsters that would otherwise tear each other to pieces. And I have to respect that. Because I know what kind of monster I am.
You, you, you can't legislate morality or civility. You either have it or you don't.
And kindred don't, by nature. So how else are we supposed to keep it? How else are we supposed to pretend?
It's not pretending. When you hold on to what made you who you were, remember your manners. Civility was always a part of it. Yes, the beast rides some more than others and makes it a little bit more difficult, but anybody with half a brain knows that you gotta have some kind of relation with others to get things done. If you just go around killing everybody, pisses you off or upsets you for whatever reason, there's a whole lot of dead motherfuckers around. As it is in this world, the kind do it enough to their own. You don't have to mimic it. But I guess that's they're animals. So we just have something driving us harder than the animals. I don't need some tradition to tell me that I need to be civil to somebody.
Perhaps.
That's still in here. I ain't lost it yet. That's part of who I am.
But you will.
Maybe.
Eventually. It'll happen. And when that day comes, I hope you'll remember what I said. Maybe in 20, 30, 50 years, we could coexist, you and I.
If you want to, like I said, I don't see that happening in Dallas or San Antonio.
Not anytime soon.
And Camarilla, if the Camarilla remains in charge, I'm not likely to be welcome in any of their cities. There was a time just being what I am, have a blood hunt called.
If you prove your worth, though, if you prove that you're worth keeping around.
To whom?
To
And
any.
how?
Having somebody vouch for you is an easy ticket. You're my baby brother. Given some time, I might be willing to do that. If
I don't know how to prove my worth.
be useful.
I've taken out 2 of my coteries' size. I helped with 1. But beyond that, I don't know what value I'd be.
Well, maybe one day. One day you'll see.
The whole time Brian's having this conversation, everything that Veronica told Brian is still rattling through his head. Particularly, never underestimate yourself, young Caitiff.
And as Noel has said, you're malleable when it comes to your abilities. And you've been toying with that little bit of inkiness in the pit of you. Maybe, just maybe, you could pass yourself as a La Sombra.
Get enough of that inkiness. They wouldn't question it.
Only way they could prove it is if somebody learned that you were caitiff. How tempting. How tempted are you to take her up on her offer?
Very close. Very tempted.
What's going through your mind right now, Mr. Matthews?
Opportunity to just leave it all behind. Coterie don't seem to trust me too much.
The coteries hardly met in the last couple of weeks.
Knowing Noel's stance. A second too long on a drink to feed. Be all he'd need for him to take my head like he did Jude. Maria's fall. She don't trust nobody. Hell, it ain't just me. Just starting to make roads with Ray, but outside of Chisholm, I don't think too many Gangrel would have taken me in, had anything to do with me.
And you play with too many of those shadows in front of the wrong eyes.
They'll take my head too. Just on the suspicion that I might be on the Sombra. The only thing that keeps him from flat out accepting it leaving and going with Katya right now is promises he made to Chisholm. And the thought of what Chisholm would think if he just turned his back on everything that Chisholm had done and given to him, taught him, helped him to achieve.
I suppose that's the choice before you right now. Do you go back to San Antonio, having to hide what it is that you are? Keep yourself from toying with the shadows just so that others don't think that you're an enemy? Or do you embrace it? Become the La Sombra that you potentially could have been with your sister by your side? Working your way into the Camarilla.
It's at this point the goals that Bryan's been working towards. There's one thing he has to do before he can leave San Antonio. And that's to make sure that there's somebody or something there to watch over and protect his son when he can't.
Which you've also been developing over the last few weeks.
Developing, but it's not there yet. And I'd still have to make trips back and forth.
If it were a bird,
Katya can see.
maybe not.
Katya can see he's really struggling within himself over the decision. I'm assuming should I stay or should I go is playing through his mind as he's debating all of this.
And the thought pops into your mind that Faust did say that he had created a trust for your son, that he'd at least be financially protected. Do you trust Faust to do that?
When it comes to matters of money, that's about all I trust the man with.
And Katya just kind of
Brian,
stands there watching you for a moment as you look like you're deep and heavy with thoughts. She just waits for you to answer.
I think I'm gonna need that 20.
Then I'll see you in 20. For now, this is goodbye.
You know how to reach me.
I won't be reaching out
If you
until
ever
then.
need me.
I
I
can't
have
risk it.
something I have to take. I understand. I have something that I can't risk either. If I haven't met my final end in 20, I'll be in touch.
And she puts out a hand for you to
Bryan
shake.
will take it. Bryan will pull her in for a big hug. I meant what I said when I told you were family. But this is too important. I can't go until I see this one through.
And she pulls back away from you. Well, have a
As
good...
she steps back, she'll see a single scarlet tear rolling down his cheek.
She just kind of sadly and softly smiles. I should get back.
I should too.
See you around, brother.
Take care of yourself, sis.
I will. And with that, she turns slowly and disappears into the dark woods, leaving you on your own.
Brown will return to his car, debating with himself the whole way back whether he made the right choice or not.
I suppose we'll never know. Because this is where we're going to leave Bryan for now. And when we come back, we'll have another vignette of one of the iconoclasts as we say goodnight to the Alamo City. Be right back, everyone. Welcome back, everyone, to the finale of San Antonio by Night's Aftermath. Now, we take a look at Faust. Several weeks after Jude had been removed from the picture and the young Ventru was making good on his promise to Marius Calhoun II that he would give him 50 years of his time in exchange for vouching for the iconoclasts, for vouching for Maria's safety, and ultimately, in part of that, educating Ray in the way that she might be useful so should she go back to Brisbane. And as a result, the The War Baron, Urian Doyle, and Marius Calhoun have met with Faust at the meeting place in the sanctuary domain. Faust, more or less, having to leave behind his coterie to pursue his education. Or at least that's how he spun it. So, Mr. Beaufort, what are your thoughts walking into this place where you know a Ventru of note and a Tremere of high esteem both await you?
I pulled the vehicle up and parked it beneath a set of trees and some shrubs and kept it somewhat obscured. Lights off as I entered the dirt road and making sure that drove slowly enough that the gravel didn't make too much noise. When I got out of the vehicle, I grabbed the bags, materials, supplies, miscellaneous shopping materials that Mr. Calhoun II and Mr. Doyle needed. It's been a few weeks since I last saw the vast majority of them. Last spoke to them after the events. In Samantha's domain, Maria disappeared. I presume, much like her sire, she must have vanished into an amorphous shadow within the night, never to be seen, never to be heard, and toiling away in her crafts, shall we say. Though I cannot guess entirely whether or not she'll be protected from the repercussions of our time together. Whether everyone will follow the War Baron's word. I'm hoping the threat of his interference will be enough to deter. And at this time, the only thing I have to fear in the future is what kind of creature Maria will become. She is a monster of my own making with this promise. I cannot be anything but a man of my word anymore. Anything but a man of my word. Bryan seems to have gone off on his own dealings. On the rare occasion, I hear tales of young new bloods having altercations, interactions with a very large individual, seeking payment retributions. As of right now, it's almost mythological. But on Setite domain, no one questions it. Mr. Stoneford, on the other hand, we've stayed in contact. It's my primary go-to whenever I have information. As business partners we were, as business partners we remain. He says his relations with his child is complicated. As for Ray, she's probably the one I speak to the most. I can't help but feel modest whenever I do speak with her. There's still spite, a little venom in everything that she says to me, but somehow I'm grateful for it. I don't hesitate now, though. I've been teaching myself not to hesitate. And in these efforts and in these trials do I find all I traded for. I can't help but feel like I'm just trying to learn to find the man that I was when Eugene was still around. The man he embraced. So, return to the Haven. I gently knock on the door.
It's at this point you would see a small man, a soul patch and an awkward bowl cut. He sees you at the door as he opens. A soft smile ends up going across pale lips before he lowers his head. Good evening, Mr. Beaufort. Will you not step into our humble abode? The Mr. Doyle will be seen short. He steps to the side as he opens the door, making a grand sweeping gesture to present the room.
Thank you, Mr. Calhoun. And Faust will step in. He has been in here a few times since being under Marius Calhoun II's service. But every time it feels distant, vague. Like there's a mysterious energy in the household that he can't quite put his finger on. It reminds him of a courtroom. No matter how small the house may be, or creaking the floors. But Faust conducts himself accordingly to that. To the image of a hall. He brings the items over to the table, sets them down, starts pulling them out. Bleach, ammonia, cleaners, scrubs, rubber gloves, an assortment. And bundles up the bag before looking over to Mr. Calhoun. Well then, errands are completed for the evening. At least, those ones.
And yet, tomorrow evening, more shall arrive. And you will end up dealing with the endeavor post haste. And yet, for tonight, I think it is best that you first discuss future matters with our dear War Baron. He is waiting for you in the study. I will guide you there and, well, wait outside until called. If you require anything of his service, do not hesitate.
I do have one question.
My knowledge is at your disposal, Mr. Biff.
He thinks about it. And Urian, you can... Marius, you can see. He's a little anxious. I suppose, just to make sure I'm not missing anything. Are there any sort of taboos that I should...
Presume that the War Baron already knows every hesitation you already have. After all, he's quite accomplished, and one ends up saying that he offers a fair amount of insight to whoever he speaks to. I would imagine that your hesitancy is that upon title, and I understand this. And yet, remember, while he is of title of Baron, he holds no power. The city claims no dominion. For his time is that of war. And the squabbling of the other barons is of very little significance to him in the grand scheme of things.
Suppose independence is a convenient tool.
In its time. Others, you require allies. After all, it is very difficult to forge a war if you have no soldiers ready to stand at your side. No individuals to fight for. It is territory that is often where the wars are fought. You see, go ahead. You notice that Marius Calhoun II seems to almost have a nostalgic look to his face. Just a moment there, before he begins walking with open hand extended hall to bring you towards the War Baron himself.
Faust follows suit, pulls himself together, tries to present a confidence.
That moment, observing Faust trying to end up righting his tie and adjusting everything just so. Marius knocks on the door 3 times before opening. His arrival is not unexpected. And when he does so, the War Baron Urian Doyle, allow me to once again present to you Faustus Alexander Beaufort of Clan Ventru, grandchild of Mr. Alistair Wolfe of an anarch in good standing in the city of San Antonio.
Thank you, Mr. Calhoun.
He lowers in a deep bow. I shall remove myself from the room, allowing you a moment to speak. I am sure whatever words Faust wishes to end up giving are to be kept between you two. I will be outside should you require anything, my Baron.
Thank you. And when Marius closes the door behind him, Faust, you are now in front of a very tall individual sitting in a chair. Looks plush, with a book in his lap, open, habitually adjusting his glasses to look at you. The sort of mockery of Catholic priesthood garb with a pentagram on the front as he straightens it a little, closing the book, and sets it aside and gestures for you to have a seat in another chair next to him.
Thank you. And Faust will sit. He's being very careful with action, very careful with how he presents himself. Thank you for seeing me, Warberry Urian Doyle.
Just Mr. Doyle will suffice.
Mr. Doyle. I suppose tonight, I wanted to check in. I've been doing the tasks and errands you've requested of me.
It's much appreciated, Mr. Beaufort.
I can't help but notice they're very mundane.
The mundane things still need to be maintained, even by those who have supernatural unlife.
It's true. Protection of the Masquerade.
And occasionally the house does need cleaning.
See, I was thinking something entirely different.
I'm curious, what were your thoughts then?
Well, it's kind of a given. I seem to have a tad reputation for more extreme history. I'm used to it being used in different ways. Got used to it in the few weeks that I have been a part of San Antonio, part of the iconoclast.
Yes, well, it doesn't hurt to have a contingency plan.
No, it doesn't.
Anticipate all scenarios.
Admittedly, it's a little bit easier to anticipate the worst possible outcome and just plan for that one.
And hope for the best. Yes?
Hope for the best. Suppose at this point, with what I've been doing, I have a question. A few questions. I'm here for the next 50 years. Not that. What can you tell me that I'll be doing? What's my role in this?
Primarily, you will be observing. While I personally don't operate with a domain of my own, much past the sanctuary domain, it still must be maintained. And when one can maintain a smaller domain of their own, perhaps they can branch out. I intend for you to be able to, at the end of the 50 years, be able to run Sanctuary in my absence. Should it ever come to that.
Run it.
Yes. See to the little things. See to the needs and wants of my constituents.
I suppose that actually might do best.
Now, if at the 50-year mark I'm not satisfied with your progress, obviously you will not be doing such a thing. What do you hope to gain?
Understanding.
The very broad desire.
It is. But I guess if I had to shorten it down into more specific terms, in the retrospective of my experience with the iconoclast, I discovered that I had power, I had abilities, I had ambition, but I didn't know how to lead.
Hmm.
And as a result, in equal parts indecisiveness and somehow tyrannicism. Did I end up driving the coterie into the position that it ended up at?
I am quite familiar with the plight of the Venture. And to answer your question simply, what do you think the answer is?
I mean, I just didn't understand how to lead. It really comes down to it. I wanted to do everything I can. I wanted to improve. I wanted to garner power where I could grasp it. As I did so, I noticed that the ones were pertinent to that, the effort to do so, to, well, the ones I was supposed to take charge of fell through my hands. And the long term of it, I could see where the pitfalls would remain in that same sense. There's no use in giving power to it like sand. I would talk big game about stewardship, but I knew nothing of it.
I see that your training has already garnered you much knowledge. Even just running mundane errands. You've had time to think.
Introspection, I suppose, is good for the soul.
So I've heard. From what I know of the venture, the simple answer is yes. It's on you. It's always you. And the sooner you come to grips with that, and the sooner you understand where you actually lie, rather than making promises that you can't deliver upon, that you know you can't deliver upon, then perhaps the failings will be less frequent. You're a fledgling, Mr. Beaufort. I don't expect you, or anyone of your age, to know the full extent to which their, I suppose, lineage means to a venture to a more extent than a Trebere like myself.
It's complicated. You can say yes or no to anything. But not always do you have the foresight to understand what that'll mean. I found myself so afraid. Consequence of my actions, of penalty of my desires.
You also said that you struggled with hesitancy. And that your hesitancy is what caused the consequences, but the consequences would have come whether you acted upon your knowledge quickly or not. Correct?
I suppose so.
So why be afraid of the consequences when you know they're coming? Regardless of what you do.
Because I've seen the consequence of, well, consequence of action.
I'm curious. You're from Dallas, yes?
Correct.
I've heard the stories, but I've not heard from another person who's experienced what's going on there currently. Why do you hesitate?
There was once a very great man. A good man. Venture I understood. He sought a means. He sought out the means to connect and end further warfare, rising tensions in Dallas between the Anarch and the Camarilla. He actively pursued means garnering a truce of some kind. As a result,
Ambitious.
quite. I would have thought that he would have made it too, but well, like all the Anarch, he too was purged.
My condolences. Might I know his name?
Eugene Amadeus Pierce of Clan Venture.
In good standing with the Anarchs of Dallas.
He was admirable. A noble gentleman. In a lot of ways, I wanted to like him. Somehow I ended up being the opposite.
I'm sure Mr. Calhoun would understand far better than I the weight of a name. The weight of your lineage.
Lineage is... it's complicated. They talk about family issues.
Family issues indeed.
From your perspective, where do I go from here? What can I pull from the time I served? What am I missing from my experiences with my coterie? The coterie.
I think the most important thing for you to do at the moment is introspection. It's garnered you quite a number of insights so far. I think the regiment is to continue such. Allow you time to introspect. Think about the events of your time with the iconoclasts and dissect. What did you promise or say or do or not do that led to the events that you feel that you have failed? Because whether or not someone else says that you are the most capable Ventru or the most inept, It's your own perceptions of yourself that you must conquer first. You feel you are a failure? Then break it down. Where did it happen?
I will.
And I think we'll continue on this path for a year. For now. And see where it leads.
Will do. I thank you for your time, Mr. Doyle. Is there anything else I may do for you?
The errands for tonight are complete. And this is you having time of your own to do some introspection.
Very well. I suppose, by basis of the errands, I should probably start working a little harder. Shouldn't I?
We'll work a little harder on what exactly?
My mask.
Your mask.
Facade.
Perhaps.
Well then. You have yourself a good evening, Mr. Doyle.
And a good night to you, Mr. Beaufort.
Faust will stand up. He will hold out his hand to the war baron.
And he'll return the handshake in kind, and you can tell there is... It's a firm grip. Not unlike your own in some cases.
When I'm done shaking, Faust will give a nod, smile. Very subtly, he'll just rub his fingers, almost as if remembering the grip, thinking about it. A question that he leaves unanswered on purpose. There's time.
There is certainly time. And so, Mr. Doyle wishes you a good night and waves you towards the door, allowing you to exit back into the rest of the house.
Faust, now returning back into the house, sees Mr. Calhoun and returning into the house, Faust he waves at him.
He
Nearly-
gives a...
I nearly forgot to thank you.
Whatever for, Mr. Beaufort.
You're welcoming me inside. It's very gracious. Thank you.
It is the small courtesies we afford one another that allow us to coexist. I've always found that my greatest lessons were always learned from my enemy. Strange as it may seem, while all things end up coming towards, let us observe many of the plights that we often find ourselves in these nights. The Camarilla oftentimes would offer moments of court to be cordial, understand the backbiting, the politics. The common one would end up saying, "Why do I go through this?" Pardon the vernacular, bullshit. Say it as it is. Very much so. The problem is that when you say it as it is, the response is often very negative and often very bloody, messy, and quite frankly, neither of us wishes to be replacing the carpets. So, with that in mind, we learn to express a certain degree of civility. And I personally have always believed that civility has been a great boon to humanity itself. And so, as we lie to ourselves of what we are by pretending to be otherwise, we in turn maybe reinforce that small piece of ourselves, that small bit of soul. And so, simply thanking somebody for inviting them into a room I view as a great step, small as it may seem.
It's validating, honestly. uh, I admit I'm not. It was a transition. Going from trying to feign, trying to hide amongst different kindred and maintaining that civility for the sake of, well, not encountering said bloody men. Dallas was a different environment. You held your tongue. You spoke like a butterfly. You maintained composure because that's what it took to stay alive.
Truly. And the common anarch does not. That is
No.
not to begrudge them. This is where again, your enemy will be your greatest teacher. In doing so, I often found myself most capable of connecting when I, if you'll pardon the turn of phrase, came down to their level. You speak not from a position where you must obey, but you instead speak on, let us discuss what is truly on you. Allow them to be heard. And make the effort to understand their vernacular. Oftentimes I run to a few choice words that often leave me all befuddled. And I oftentimes ask my compatriots, what do they mean what is a simp? And yet, as I grow to understand their vernacular, perhaps on occasion they will learn mine. And in turn, we speak with one another. And thus, we have introduced a healthy amount of civility and vulgarity. And yet, we are speaking.
It took me a bit far too long to realize. Etiquette is not necessarily, by definition, a specific. It's not by definition a specific class, so to speak, but more so culture.
In time, I found San Antonio to be rife with culture. I still to this day lament that I do not spend more time in particular venues in sporting arenas.
But I certainly guess that's what I mean. Is it seems like that's San Antonio's etiquette. That took me some time to figure out.
That is what it is now. How it will be after 50 years, though. Well, as I said, as you go to learn their vernacular, the hope is that they will learn a portion of yours.
Hopefully. Hopefully I can be the listener I need to be for that.
That is a beginning. Tell me. I've been musing. He gestures, and by this time you've probably been walking beside him, and he takes you to a very unusual room for kindred, a kitchen. It's very clear it's not been used, but he goes out of his way to plug in a kettle, one of those little electric ones that don't require fire or exposure to heat, but he does so as he places 2 cups down. Cream, sugar?
I used to be a cream guy.
Cream it is. He sets it up and he waits for.
Faust thinks about it. And he's just staring at the kettle and looks back to Urian.
Marius.
The deception isn't working.
Eyewitness viewed. He looks at Marius and raises an eyebrow. Why tea?
Would you believe I don't remember?
I guess I can believe that.
I hope not, because I am far too young to be forgetting my own history. Childers such as us only have so much time. But I take time to connect to the things that are most important. One might believe that is perhaps overseeing a piece of domain, tending to one's herd, or running a major corporation such as yourself. But to me, most important things always happen between them. He begins to pour the tea, and the smell of Earl Grey and cream starts to fill the room as he gestures towards this very modest kitchen table and places a cup with a saucer in front of him. Much like everything else, it is a matter of heat and patience. Put enough energy into it. Give it the time to ripen. Not so much that you burn the leaves, but enough to bring out the flavor, and you can create small moment. While we are forbidden from drinking the tea, not without very unpleasant circumstance, we can still hold a cup that is warm in our hand. We can still savor the aroma as we savor good company. To you, Mr. Prof.
Faust holds the cup. He puts it close to him. He smells the aroma of the tea, though he can't taste it. He remembers a different time. He remembers when Eugene sat him down. Made him fresh cup. The English breakfast, of all things. And almost like a proposal. Told Faust they were going to do great things together. And unconsciously, zoned out in his own little head, a single tear starts to well up in his eyes. And Faust just sets the cup down and wipes it away.
I hope I have not distraught you, Mr. Broford.
No. The opposite. Had a happy little daydream is all.
Ah, to dream. Tell me, are you at liberty to discuss what it is that you and the Baron discussed?
I'm open to it. I sought introspection. Or rather, from the Baron, I sought a second perspective. What I had done, where he intended for me to go. I'm used to thinking, long-term game plan, far-sighted goal that I can slowly build up towards.
This is good.
So I sought out a little bit of concept on that. Something to visualize, and he gave me some direction. But he mostly wants me to give myself direction.
Well, you are far past the stage where one would ghoul a servitor to learn. And yet, perhaps there is some value in taking your time. I often wonder, Did he make his own vision known?
Faust thinks about it. Most I garnered was you might someday move on to other meadows. Build the domain. And then move on. And I'm not. It's my failing. I didn't really pry too much.
Not at all. Perhaps he pried enough. Why ever would he mention that he would not be here? Kindred not exactly known for taking vacations. Very few of us look forward to enjoying the Miami sun or swept beaches.
Certainly not. I can't help but think that maybe there was something to return.
Do you think you're ready? Do you think you will be ready?
I want to be. But not so much for the domain or power to wield with it, but hoping I'm the kind of person who can wield that power.
Can and should. Two drastically different things. If the Anarchs were to teach us anything, it is that power held through forced grip requires either an iron hand or one that will soon be lopped aside or removed from the wrist. And yet, what is it that we truly seek when we think of these things? To grab a hold onto power or something so ephemeral. I don't think you will fully understand the power in that regard. Child, or like ourselves, typically walk into a room and see a room full of powerful individuals. Perhaps artists, no, actors and senators and doctors of great repute. Perhaps we end up dealing with a president or an emperor or something of those minds. And we often think, if we had, which without her own capabilities, that is quite easy. And yet it would not be enough. Because that will never be more powerful than your ability to step into a room for all to give you the respect you are due. Not through your demands, but because everyone knows to. Dignitas is a very powerful tool, one that many lack, but you will learn in ways that I don't think many have the privilege to do so. The question there is, what do you do with it? Introspection is good, but what are we really trying to gain when doing so? a mastery of self, a mastery of our beast, perhaps all the money that could build the mountains again and again to pile it higher than Everest itself, or fill the Mariana Trench with all the wealth the world could muster. And yet this would bring you nothing. So what are we seeking, Mr. Beaufort? I have been meditating on this for quite some time, so I am simply giving you, call it, springboard.
I suppose in the long run. Legacy. It's a large motivator.
It is. I would garner perhaps the more important is wisdom.
And that too.
And after all, what is a legacy but what you pass down towards your child or into the generation afterwards? Be they heed it or not, all you can do is offer. But it is a legacy that continues to serve. And thus we come full circle from Anarch to Camarilla. For wisdom, repeated, becomes tradition. And then the folly happens when we do not understand why that tradition became in the first place, or where it is left. Time is on your side, Mr. Buell. And it can always be found between the business, between the herd, between the domain. Near a cup of tea.
Suppose I have one last question for you.
I am at your near service at all times.
What does the name Calhoun mean to you?
Do you wish for the long version or the short version?
Wish for the version you wish to tell now. And I'll find the other later. There's time, after all.
And we see the image change to the last time, one of the last times, that Prince Marius Calhoun enjoyed a cup of Earl Grey tea with his seneschal. And we will continue that story that Urian tells next week with Session 0 of War in the Soul City, where we will follow a coterie at the edge of Camarilla and Anarch Domain, defending their city against a threat. But in the meantime, thank you all so much for watching. We thank you for staying with us with Aftermath, and hope that you will join us next week for more Vampire the Masquerade actual play. Thank you all. Be sure to follow us on YouTube because that's where everything's going to go. And thus concludes San Antonio by Night. Say goodnight, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.
See you later. And good night.